Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for clicking on today's video. Today I've got an Ultimate Silks home setup guide to teach you everything you need to know about rigging your silks at home. If you're new here, my name's Brendan. I put out videos about all things aerial. I've got loads of drop, spin and pose tutorials as well as foundation moves, so make sure you check those out. This is probably going to be a bit of a long one, so I'll leave timestamps in the description down below so you can jump straight to the sections you're interested in. Alright, let's get started, and remember, you've got this. I've had my blue silks here for about 2 years and they're getting a little worn and due for replacement. I'll talk to you a little bit later about how to know when your silks need replacing, but first let's get on to the exciting stuff. I got myself a brand new dark green silk and I thought this would be a great opportunity for me to show you how I rig my silks at home. Before we get to that though, let's talk about all the equipment that you're going to need. So the most obvious thing that you'll need is the silk itself. These come in a bunch of different materials, but the most common is a 40 denier nylon tricot. You need to make sure that it's weight rated and specific for silks. You can also choose from different levels of stretch, from no stretch through to high stretch. The low stretch silks are great for beginners. You'll find that you have a lot more energy and you can do tricks a little bit easier, whereas the middle and high stretch variations are a lot more comfortable, especially for bigger drops. Next, you'll need to decide if you want to get your silk in a kit or just the fabric on its own. If you decide to go for a kit, it should come with everything you need to get started. So that would be a figure 8, 2 carabiners and a swivel. Let's have a look over those now. First, we've got the figure 8. This is what you're going to tie your silks to, and I'll show you how to do that a little bit later. This is just one of many options there are for rigging your silks. I personally like this option because when the silks are tied to the figure 8, the tails are slightly separated at the top here, which makes it easier to separate the silks when you're practicing. I also think the knot at the top looks quite nice when it's all tied up. Next, we've got the carabiners. This is what you're going to use to attach your figure 8 to your swivel and your swivel to your rigging. The ones that come with the kit are screw lock carabiners. So what that means is you need to unscrew the gate before you can open it and then re-screw it to close. It's recommended that with screw gate carabiners that you put them facing down so that when they move about they're less likely to unscrew. You need to try and find a balance between doing them up tight enough that they're not going to come undone, but not so tight that they become really tricky to open. Another option is an auto lock carabiner. So this is an example of an auto lock carabiner. You twist it and open it in a very similar way, but it locks on its own, so you don't need to worry about how tight it's going to get. And finally, we've got the swivel. If your head jumped straight to spinning, then you would be right. This little guy helps us to spin. Without it, the silks or the rigging would get tangled. Eventually you would come to a stop and then you'd slowly have to unwind. In fact, depending on how your silks are rigged, it may not be safe to spin if you don't have a swivel. This is because the spinning creates twists in the fabric and the rigging, and it can create a weakness and cause your rig to fail, which is something that we want to avoid at all costs. So do yourself a favor and make sure you get a swivel. So that's it for the equipment. The only other thing you'll want to consider is where you're buying your equipment from. Make sure you're buying from a reputable seller and that everything's rated appropriately. When you're doing big drops, you can generate more than 7 times your own body weight, so you want to make sure your equipment's not going to fail. Safety first, guys. Alright, now that we've covered all of the equipment, let's put it all together and get ready to rig. The first step is attaching your silks to the figure 8. Lay your silk on the ground, fold it in half so you can find the center. Pass the center through the middle of the figure 8, pulling about 30 to 40 centimeters through. You're then going to pass the center down in between the tails, keeping the silks nice and tight as you pull them through. Bring the end back through the middle of the figure 8. And then loop it over the top. Once you're done, pull on the tails to take out any slack to make the knot tight and neat. You're now ready to attach the rest of your hardware. Take your first carabiner and unscrew it to open the gate. Attach this onto your figure 8.
Open the gate one more time and attach to your swivel. Then screw the gate closed. Remembering with screw gate carabiners, we always turn them to face down before rigging. Take your second carabiner and attach it to your swivel. Your silks are now ready to rig. I attach my silks to a freestanding rig in my backyard. If you want to know more about my rig or how I use my pulley system, let me know in the comments down below. If you don't have a freestanding rig, I recommend seeking the help of a professional rigger to make sure your home setup is safe. Not all beams are designed to take heavy loads, and this is really not something you want to guess about. It's just not worth the risk.
If you've had your silks for a while and you're not sure if you need to replace them or not, up next I'm going to show you a couple of things that you need to keep an eye out for. Now earlier I mentioned that I've only had my silks for 2 years, which might seem a little bit early to be replacing them, but I do use them quite a lot, and whenever I do use them, it's outside in direct sunlight, which in Australia is quite harsh. This is why I don't have a time frame recommendation on replacement, but rather an inspection based approach. To put it simply, we're looking for signs of wear or damage. You should stop using your hardware immediately if it shows excessive signs of wear, or if it's not functioning as it normally would, or if there's any damage at all. So if there are any cracks or chips, stop using your hardware and replace it with new stuff. It's just not worth the risk. So this is my figure 8 on the blue silks. You can see that there's a little bit of wear here. I'll insert some photos and some videos so that you can see it a little bit clearer. But the paint has worn away, exposing the metal underneath. This type of damage doesn't necessarily warrant a replacement immediately, because you can see from this angle that the integrity of the hardware itself is still intact. So there's basically no metal missing from the top here.
When you're inspecting your equipment, I always recommend taking it apart. If you have a look when everything's connected, it can be a lot harder to see any signs of wear or any damage. You also need to make sure that you're checking your silks themselves. As you can see here, my silks has quite a lot of sun damage and the colour has faded quite a bit in some areas. UV is strong in Australia and it definitely takes a toll on my silks. UV damage can weaken the silk, making it unsafe for practice. It might not look super obvious, but if you compare it to this photo I took the day I got my silks, you can really see just how sun bleached they are. Finally, you need to keep an eye out for runs and holes in your silks. When holes form in this material, they run vertically, not horizontally, making it a lot safer for performers. Some people stitch the silks back together, but in my opinion this will never be as strong as an undamaged silk. And if you start noticing holes appearing in your fabric, then it's time for a new one.